Today I'm going to do a video on a box that I'm preparing to put my extra battery in so I can have two batteries to run off of when I'm running my XP. I've done a previous video showing you a tote box that I made for my XP so I could carry my extra battery, but I found out in doing that it's fine, but if you do it a lot, you need that extra battery a lot, it gets to be a little bit of a hassle. Stop on the side of the road to break your bike open to get your battery out and then pull the battery out and mess with two batteries while you're sitting on the side of the road swapping out your batteries. You know, it's not the easiest thing in the world. So I've decided that what I'll do is I'll make me another box and for my spare battery, but this one is going to be powered to the bike, and I'm going to show you what items that you're going to need if you want to make one of these. And I have these items right in front of me. Okay, I've got my tape measure in hand, so I'll let you know what size materials you need. First of all, you can get most of this stuff at Lowe's, and I ordered some stuff off of Amazon, such as my wiring and things. Well, first thing you need to do is go in and get you some 1x3. And the nominal size on 1x3 is, I think, 2.5 by 3/4 of an inch. So once you get that, you have to strip it down. In other words, I stripped this down from 2.5 inches down to 2 inches. So these numbers right here, 2 inches, that's how deep the box is going to be. And it's 3/4 of an inch wide. So you need 2 of those for the side of the box, and you need 2 for the end of the box. And the same thing, I just ripped all of these off, and this is 2 inches by 3/4 of an inch. And so the next thing I did was I got me some Luan, or Luan, however you want to pronounce it, and got me some of that, and I had to rip it off to get the proper size. So the proper size for this box, dimension-wise, is 6 inches wide by 19 inches long. This is the top, this is the bottom, vice versa. Really doesn't make any difference because they're the same right now. So the top and the bottom. And you may wonder what this is. This is also some Luan. And what I do with this is I put it on the bottom piece, which was going to be removable on this bike. This is the bottom piece. This is what the battery is going to actually be resting on when it's inside the box. And what this is, when you line them up like that, let me turn it over so you can get some contrast. When I line it up like so, your side piece is going to be here, your end piece is going to be here, here, and here. And when you lay the battery in place, it's going to be like so. And this little notch, you notice on your battery, you've got a notch here on your battery. Well, what that does is that rests in that spot, so this battery lies flat on this layer of Luan that I have there. It lays flat on it. If I didn't have that in there, then this would not lay flat. It would lay resting on that and resting on the end down here. And I wanted it to be solid on this, so that's the reason I made that portion right there. And what this is a sign. You pick these up at Lowe's, and it's made out of plastic. And I wanted it to have a more solid finish on the outside to make it a little more rugged than just the wood, because that you can dimple the wood, it hits things that are dead in. This gives it a little more of a body. So this is exactly 19 inches wide, this particular sign. So it fits perfect on this piece of Luan. And so I'm going to take that and I'll cut it out the proper size to put a veneer, outside veneer on this material. So that's what this is for. This is wrap. This is black wrap. I've actually used it on my XP already to cover up the Lectric on it and put my own little name on the bike. But anyway, this is an 18-inch roll of it, and I'll use it to go over the exterior of this box. And what I'm going to use on the interior of the box is spray plastic dip. You have to put several coats on it, and what that will do is that will give it something to rest on, so it won't it won't be laying just against the wood. Kind of serves two purposes. It kind of seals off the wood so it's not exposed to whatever elements it may be exposed to, but it gives it a seal and a soft seal to lay up against as opposed to just painting it out. And next I'll show you what I ordered these from Amazon, and this is a coupler that I'm going to use. This will go to the bike. This has got a 15 amp fuse in it. This is 10 gauge wire. The higher gauge wire you got is really the butt of your connection is going to be with your battery, between your power source and your controller. If you get too small of wire and it starts to heat up a little bit, it's losing energy. So your energy is not making it to your motor, but you're using up energy. So it's better to have a heavier wire than one that's not heavy enough. Plus, if it's really not heavy enough and you don't have a fuse in there, you potentially have something to catch on fire. But this is more than adequate, I can guarantee you this. I didn't realize it until after I ordered it. This 10 gauge is probably more than I need. I would have probably been better off by going with a 12 gauge. 12 gauge would probably be more than ample. You could probably even go down to a 14 gauge. I wouldn't go any less than a 14 gauge. But anyway, this is 10 gauge, and this is going to fit on my box on the bottom of it, and this is going to be a plug-in, and this just plugs right in. And when you don't have the box on, you're not using it, you want to keep weather out or moisture out or whatever, so it's got a little cap on it. And this end also has a cap on it if you're not if you don't have this wire in use. So both ends have caps. So that's what I'm going to be wiring it up, and I'll show you later on. This is some shrink tubing, and what I'm going to do is the part of this wire that's exposed to the outside of the bike, this will end up inside by the controller. This portion will come out of the frame and go to the battery. And I'm going to cover this with shrink tape. It's got a little bit right there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this whole thing so it's black rather than having a red and black wire showing it. It'll just have one solid, what appears to be black wire. So that's what the shrink tape is for. I've got this. You don't necessarily have to have this, but I'm going to have this on the end of the box, like so, and it'll give me a place to actually tote the box around, something to grab to tote it around with a battery in it, and also use it, since it'll be facing the back, I will use it to mount a strobe light or whatever I want. These they were actually some little angle braces, and I cut them down and I made them to fit into the battery slot, so that I'll take these pieces and I will solder them to the end of this wire so I can put them in place. You've got a positive and a negative. These two end channels are positive and negative connections. And it's good to have this color-coded wire, that way you won't get confused somewhere along the way. Just make sure that your red's positive and your black's negative. And this little plug right here, this will end up using that. This is the actual size of the battery to be up, and I will have it in the box, and this will actually plug down over the hole that I have to make so I can charge the battery without taking it out of the box. And also on the bottom side where your lock is, I will have to have a hole in the bottom so that this can go channel into that hole. When you turn the key on, this comes out, so you will need that. And this is the key side right here, and it'll end up with one of these boards on it, and I will put me a round hole in that so I can put my key in here and turn it on and off while it's in the box. That's real important. So those are the items that you need. They're the basic items. Of course, you're going to need some screws and some glue and some other stuff. I'll probably end up just using some tight bond glue to glue my box together and things such as that. And I also use it in conjunction with screws. And once I cover it with this, I'll laminate this. I'll put probably some type of spray adhesive so I can laminate it right to the wood. And so I have this on the outside of the wood box, and then I will cover it all with the vinyl wrap. So that should give me a good finish. And I've also have some tape here that I'll probably wrap around my box like I did my last box. And this is a blue. It doesn't quite match the blue on the XP, but it's close enough. This is a reflective tape, so I'll run this around in conjunction with that. Just give me a little design on the box, just so it won't look like just a black box. So basically, that's what you need. Then again, you just need to cut this tailor-made for that. So the dimensions on that are pretty straightforward as far as getting it within the confines of this box, which the box will go together through your end pieces. Like so is your box. This will go in inside the box like so. This will be like so, and then the battery will fit in there. And the 19 inches works out fine. You don't have any extra room, and I wanted it to fit tight in there so the battery wouldn't have a tendency to move around. So that's basically what you're going to need. Moving on to auxiliary battery box assembly. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is to cut the plastic veneer. Let me square it up. If you notice, it has rounded corners on the plastic that I'm relaminating with. And I want to make sure that I get past those rounded corners so I can get a square corner on my laminate. All right, now I draw my lines off, and I want to cut this a little bit larger than the board that it's going to go on. So that's my first piece. And what I'm going to use to cut it with is a plexiglass cutting knife. When you're cutting this plastic, it's better to cut it a little bit larger than your pattern because you want a little overlap, because later on you can come back and sand that smooth. Now that I've got my first piece cut, I'm going to check to make sure that it aligns with the wood that it's going to be laminated to. Okay, it lines up perfectly. Okay, since they align, I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to take the two sides and the two ends and I'm going to put them on the board to see that everything lines up. When you rip off these sides and ends, you've got a rough side or edge due to the ripping. I usually make sure that that's placed up because I'm going to be taking some Titebond and gluing the top to those boards so that won't show. So everything's lined up. What I'm going to do now is take the filler board that's going to be laminated to the bottom, put it in, make sure it's lined properly. That's to level out the battery when it's placed into the box. Okay, everything lines up. I've got enough room up front for my wiring. Got enough room for the batteries to run, double it back to tie it in, so it gives me a little bit of breathing room. That's basically how it's going to be. The battery is going to be flush against that side and that end. So you're going to have a slight gap on the other side, and I'm going to put some wedges in the gap so to tighten things up. Now I'm going to turn it over, and one end board I need to cut a hole through for the key. And so I've already measured this and marked it off. And the key is slightly offset. It's not quite on center on the battery, so I have to compensate for that. So I just measure everything out and make sure that I know where the hole is and have it aligned properly. So it's not going to be directly in center. So it's a little bit toward the left. Okay, I'm going to put this other board on to compensate for thickness, and I'm going to measure that so I know exactly where my center point to my key is, and I've got it measured off and marked. So I'm ready to drill a hole in this board. Not only do you have to center the hole, but you've got to consider that the whole key is going to go into that hole. So we're going to have to make the measurement for the hole for the size of the key. So this key can go in and I can turn it. So I've got enough room. It's going to take about 1.25 inches bit to make the hole big enough for the key to fit into and give me a little bit of leeway. Okay, so I want that hole to go right here. I've got a drill press over here to the side. I'm going to go ahead and drill the hole through this board. Got the hole drilled it out. I'm going to check and make sure everything lines up properly. I got my key in, turns, seems to work fine. And let me put my spacer in, check it again. Okay, everything's working fine. Now I've got to drill a hole in the bottom so that the pin that comes out when you lock it will go into. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to put a little bit of paint on the pin and then turn it over, and wherever that pin hits it'll be a little paint mark. So now I've got to get a hole in my laminate, so I'll do that next. So now I will start assembling the sides, and again the rip edge that you rip is rough, so make sure that that's up. And all four boards, the two ends and the two sides, will have a rough side and a smooth side. I'm putting the smooth side down, the rough side up. Two rough sides. I'm going to leave the smooth sides down and bring the rough sides up. So now I've got everything together. I'm going to screw these together in conjunction with the Titebond. So let me clamp it up temporarily. Since I'm going to put some wood glue on it, I don't want to get it on my carpet. I don't mind getting the glue on this board. What I'll do now is take some Titebond and put it on the surfaces of my wood. Now I'll make sure that I'm flush. What I'm going to do now is get me and put one screw in each corner. It's probably a little bit of an overkill with the Titebond. Okay, go ahead and make my little pilot hole and countersink for my screw head. Okay, I've got it recessed. I'll take my wood screw and go ahead and put it in. Okay, got it in place. Now just to make sure that things won't slip and it's in alignment, keep my alignment, I'm going to put a nail in. So let me go ahead, and I'll do each of my corners like this, one screw and one nail. And I'll countersink that nail head so it won't protrude up. Okay, and now I'm going to put the top on here. I've already put my glue on here, but I'm going to spread my glue out evenly. Go ahead and spread it. Now I'll put my top on, get it aligned. Now I'm going to take a nail, tack the nail in to hold that corner down, sit in place. Now I'll go to my other corner and make sure everything's in alignment and put it in. Now I'll proceed with all my nails holding the top down. And once I get all of them in place, I'll come back and I'll countersink all the heads. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to just sand off my wood and sand off my edges and make sure that everything is flush. Everything's flush. I'm going to try my laminate, see how it fits. Okay, now I've got the hole in the bottom for the charging cord to go through. I was going to spray the inside with the liquid plastic, but I decided to go ahead and use some art foam that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. This will give us a little bit of a cushion, so I decided to use this on the bottom and the side that the battery would be laying against, and also the end. And what I did to get a hole through in the right place was, let me go ahead and put this sheet foam in the proper place so I get everything in the right place. Now I'm going to place my battery in the box, and what I did, I put a little nipple on my charging pin, and I put a little dab of paint on it, and then I laid it down and I dropped it, and where it hit on the bottom, that's where I drilled out my hole for the charging plug. Now it lines up with my terminal, and so I put that little yellow cap, put the paint on it, got it centered on the hole, drilled the hole out, and now as you see, it lines up perfect. Just a little nipple, little caps. Put it on that plug. Took the marker, marked it, put it down, made a dot down. So I've got that lined up. If you remember what this material is, it's some of the plastic veneer. I put that in there as a shim so everything would be tight when the lids are put on the box. The battery won't slip around. Okay, and the foam and the plastic laminate was the right thickness for that lip that's on the battery. So it made everything flush out properly. When I put the lid on here, the battery's going to be locked in place. It's not going to be able to move around. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and put the foam in here. And that's the bottom foam. And I'm using this double sticky tape. I had to buy a new roll of this tape. This is 3-inch, and I bought it from Amazon, and you can get it wider and thinner. I've got some 1/4-inch. I use this tape a lot. It's very useful. It's a permanent double sticky tape. It has a backing on it, so you can lay it in place and then you pull the backing off. And it's a fibrous type glue material. So just peel it off. It's just like double sticky tape. And also, I've got that plug I was talking about. And I was telling you I've got a plug here that plugs right into my charging terminal. When it's in there, it fills up the hole, and it'll keep moisture out and everything. And it's the same diameter as the hole, and it's tight. And that'll protect it against the weather and things. Okay, I've laminated the top, and everything's smooth. You might notice that I've got a paint pen, and I go around the edges so that if any of these edges are exposed, they'll be black and they won't be noticeable. And so I do it on the inside and the outside. I also do it inside the holes. Just makes it look a little bit nice. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the side pieces on. Here goes the one with the hole in it. I've got the hole already in it, so I just line everything up. I'm going to take the double sticky tape instead of contact cement. A lot easier to do it with the contact tape, especially without going outside. And it's a little bit easier to line things off with the double sticky tape. Once you get it aligned, you just pull the tape backing right off. You can do this 2 ways. You can either apply it to the wood or you can apply it to the laminate. I'm going to go ahead and apply it to the laminate on this particular piece. It really doesn't make any difference. It's a little bit easier to cut sometimes when you put it on the laminate as far as cutting the tape and making it straight. What I want to do now is to use a roller and roll this tape on, make sure I get all my air bubbles out, make sure that the corners are tight before I try to put the 2 pieces together. Now I take my scissors or my X-Acto and get off any excess tape, try to get it all nice and flush. Okay, I'm going to peel plastic back a little bit to get me a starting point, place where I can get hold of the backing to pull it on out. What I'm trying to do right now is just to line everything and get it flat down. Once I do that, then I'll pull my backing off. Okay, I rolled it out, checking my edges here. I've got a little bit of an overlap, which is what I want. That way I can sand the overlap down, so that's fine. Everything seems to be looking good. Okay, now I'll get my sander and I'll sand these edges flush. I've got that one flush. I'll also take these ends and flush those out. Okay, I've got it all finished out. I've got my laminate on all of my edges of the box. I'm going to take the hard edges and I'm going to ease those edges by sanding them down. That way the vinyl wrap won't be stressed at those edges, and it'll just make it roll a little bit better. So once that's done, I can start putting my vinyl wrap on. Okay, so I'll start sanding these edges down. Once I get those sanded down, then I'll be ready for the vinyl wrap. Everything looks good. Okay, I've completed my plastic laminate process, so now I can go to my vinyl wrap process. Once I get the vinyl wrap in place, I'll start putting the art foam inside. Next, I will start working on the bottom. Okay, I've got the bottom lid laminated. Okay, if you notice, I also took my paint pen out and I painted all of my corners just in case they are exposed a little bit once I've have it wrapped. I also notched a little hole for the battery key pin to fit in. Here is the hole for the locking bolt to go into, so when it goes down flush against it, it'll have a place to go into. I have in my hand the wiring harness that will go into the box. These wires will be hooked to my battery, and it has a round sleeve that'll fit into this hole that I've drilled into the lid, and I can get it into the hole and align the harness connection any way I want. Okay, with the harness through the hole, I can place my leads in such a way that I can hook them to the battery. So the positive lead I just put in, now the negative lead, and I'll insulate these once I get it in it so I won't have any short out. Now that's how it's going to be wired in the box. This is the way to actually be sitting in the bike, and then the box will place over top of it. I came across another plug that I felt like would work a little bit better, so I'm not going to be using the one that I showed earlier. That's for the battery charger lead, that's for the battery key, and this is for the power harness. This will be the power harness that will go to my bike. This will stay on my bike permanently. I'll show you how to wire this up when I get to that point. I'm going to start out with putting the vinyl wrap on my bottom lid. What I want to do first of all is to prep my surface. Make sure you get everything as clean as you can. I'm using alcohol to clean the surface. Okay, I'm going to get it centered onto the vinyl wrap. I'm placing these weights over it to kind of hold it in place so it won't move around. I want to get it aligned properly, then make some marks so I know where my places are on the backing. Now I'm going to peel back a starting point on my wrap. This particular wrap has some air chambers in it that will let the air escape, so you're not as likely to get bubbles in your wrap. This is the same wrap that I used on my XP to cover up the Lectric, and I came up with my own lettering. This black vinyl wrap was a perfect match with the black on my XP. This wrap has a repetitive pattern that you can use to cut straight lines, and it helps. I've got it aligned, and I'll get a starting point established. Now I'll get my squeegee and I'll push it flat on the surface. Now I'll flip it over and get all the edges, turn them in, and make sure that they are sealed properly. I'll now take my heat gun and make sure that it is bonded well to the surface. The heat gun also shrinks this wrap to a certain extent so it pulls tighter. Use caution when using the heat gun because it can burn right through this vinyl wrap. And then I'll give it one final roll down. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to finish it out and get the rest of the wood. I'm going to use this plastic dip spray. This will not only seal the wood off, it'll also give kind of a rubber finish. And last, I have to cut a hole in the vinyl wrap for my wiring. Okay, as you can see, I took the bike rack off of my bike. Felt like this was the best way to do it rather than try to do all this measuring with it on the bike. You just go ahead and take your rack off. It's not the full bolts that hold your rack on, so it's not a big deal. And then, of course, you have to unplug it for your tail light. But by doing that, I can take this and I can put this exactly where I want it to be. What I have done, since there's a lot of irregularity on the rack itself, I took actually these ends of the rack turned up a little bit. Well, it really kind of interfered with this. I went ahead and leveled this off so it's not projecting out. But I've got a pad here and a pad here to catch that, because actually the surface of this is higher than the side rail. And the way that I positioned them, I've got the back of my bottom lid for my battery, keeping that level with the back of the rack. And so I came in here and put another pad, and so I can sit here and I don't have to do any measurements because I just lay it on top and I get it centered. I kind of wanted to come up with some type of unique way of attaching this to the rack. I did my other box with Velcro, which worked, but I thought I'd do a little bit of a different approach this time. I'm going to use some fasteners that I'm making, and I improvise a lot. So you may want to improvise like I do. You may come up with another way that you want to clip. You may want it to be permanent. If so, that makes it a little bit easier. I don't. I want to be able to take this box off and on without very little problem. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have that attached to the top, which actually will go through and end up going into the side rail. Got some fairly long screws because I want this to have some substance to it. And these little plates right here, you could either get you some steel plates. I felt like it needed to be fairly thick because you don't want it to bend this, the rack to bend this. You want it to be strong. So what I did, I had some angles laying around. Probably you pick these up at Lowe's. And I took the angles and I cut this section out right here because I made it about perfect. Now I have to go through and drill a hole into this. But what it's going to do, it's going to lay right there like so. And I'm going to have it so this will pivot. And by pivoting, I can pivot all four ends and release it off the rack. And what I will do, I'm going to take all of this material and I'm going to cover it with shrink wrap. So it will have won't be a metal against metal and everything. But I'll put this in the shrink. I'll put some shrink wrap around this. And I'm going to also put some shrink wrap around the cylinder also. So everything will be black, so it'll look like metal. And I worked out, I just found me a piece of plastic that was the right diameter. I wanted it to be no larger than the width of that, which this turned out to be. So I found this little piece of tubing. And what I did with this tubing was I had a heavy duty hose right here that I put inside this tubing in here. And by doing that, it gets this size down to about the diameter I wanted, which is this size here. I'll end up putting a washer right here. And what this washer does, it actually puts pressure on this rubber as opposed to this plastic, which is good because in doing that, I'll be able to tighten down my anchor. I'll be able to anchor it down into place. Once I get all this made now, also what I'm going to do is put shrink wrap. It's a little bit of a wobble in here. And I kind of want some friction in here so it won't turn all that easily. And so I've come up, what I did, I took heat tubing again and just did a series of it, and I have that up in here, and that will create a very tight fit into there. But we'll come back to this once I've done all of this, and you'll see more clearly what I do. But by having this in the corner, it does several things. I'll place these in such a way that these will also act to hold this rack in a certain position. It'll cern it up. I have one there, one at each corner. And not only, what it'll do is it'll place this bottom lid for my battery and place this in position, and the clamps will hold it in place. That's my idea for that. I've got everything covered now with my shrink wrap, my black shrink wrap. Got my plug in place right here. That'll be the plug that goes in where I charge my battery. And you can probably pick these up at an automotive store or whatever, the plugs. I had to take this plug and I had to add material around it. And I use shrink wrap a lot with different things because it's so easily to manipulate shrink wrap and make it do it. See, that's probably, I don't know, might be maybe 5 ply or layers of shrink wrap to get the diameter of this plug, fit this hole like I want it to fit. Got all that in place. Took the box. I've got this art foam here, here, and here. I also made me 2 little rails right here. And what those rails do, they force the battery to lie against this wall here, which is what I wanted. I'll also point out that on the bottom side of this bottom lid, I did use the plastic dip. I sprayed it on, and what it does, it gives it not only a black finish, which looks a little bit better, but it also gives it some rubber cushioning. And I also, in here, where I put the art foam, put it on this wall, this side wall, the end walls, and the top surface to give some cushioning for the battery to lay in, and of course the 2 rails there. And the rest of the area in here is also sprayed with this same plastic dip spray. I did all of that and I actually got that plastic dip spray around the edges also and right here, and what it will do is it'll give it kind of an insulated surface when it's go together like so. And I'm going to also take this material, and I've already done this surface. I've got some Automotive Sealant over there, which is a very slick product. And I'm going to actually wipe this down with it. And what it does, it makes it so it's not as sticky. This dip spray is rather sticky because it's rubber. By putting it on it, it kind of slicks it out. And it will also prevent these 2 surfaces, once they're press down and remain for a long time pressed together, that they won't end up sticking to each other. Because if I didn't do that, probably over time, this rubber and that rubber, the problem, the molecules in the products, the same thing. For a lot of pressure, it would probably won't bind over time. And by doing that, it would stick together. So that's what I'm putting the automotive sealant on top of all of this, so it won't stick. And I'm going to end up putting stripes around this and everything. But first of all, I'm going to get it made just like I want it. I've got my fasteners and everything in place that keeps the box attached to the rack. I don't know if you can tell how that works, but these tabs will turn away, so I can turn them away and then I can take it off the rack. But that should work sufficiently as the box. To take it off, all I have to do is rotate these around. They've got friction catches on them, so they shouldn't come undone. Rotate them like that, and it comes right off the rack. These go into the side plate. I'm going to put several more screws to hold this lid in place, but I think overall these two main ones right here really kind of do the work. And this is what the finished product looks like. These are the screws that go in that holds this in place. Goes through like so. Okay, I've got the battery harness in. That gives you some idea of it. I'll put the cap on it. That's the battery harness. The way that I hook it up is like this. Slide my battery on in, and as you can see, this has very little movement. It'll even have less movement than that once I put the top on. Just wire it up. Make sure you get your leads right. The red goes to the positive and the black goes to the negative. Once I get the wiring in place, I can put the bottom lid on. Make sure the leads are tucked out of the way. Now with the battery in, I'm going to put this low density foam on the top of the battery. The low density foam will just give it a tight fit with the battery in the box. Okay, I've got everything in here. Now I'm going to get my multimeter and check out my battery voltage and my polarity. Okay, with my key in place and turned on, I'm showing 48 volts. Turn it off, it goes to 0 volt. Turn it back on, it goes to 48. Okay, so all of that checked out. I had an extra power harness around here that was 14 gauge. I've decided to use that instead of the 10 gauge because the 10 gauge wiring is so heavy. And I checked it out, and the wiring harness that came with one of the batteries was 14 gauge, so that 14 gauge should be sufficient. Plus the 14 gauge harness is in black, so I won't have to cover the red wiring with strength tubing. This is how the battery box will sit on my rack, and I will be placing my rack bag over this box. The bag will sit at the rear of the box so that I will have enough room to plug in my charger. Let me plug my charger in and I'll check out, make sure everything will cut it on. It'll be green, plug it into the battery, should go to red, pull it out of the battery, go back to green. Okay guys, I've got it completed. Now all I have left is to wire up my bike. Okay, I put my handle on it. I've also put my striping on it. I've got my blue line, and that's over my reflective tape with one black pinstripe down the middle. Battery's in there nice and snug, it doesn't move around. Now this battery box will be replacing my old one, which my old one did not have the power leads to my bike. Moving on to bike wiring. Okay guys, I've got my bike on the work stand and I'm getting ready to show you how to connect the wiring. First you have to get into your panel. Your control unit and everything is behind here. But mainly what I'm concerned with is just what I'm taking out right now. And I'm going to have to figure out how to get my wiring through. So this is the panel right here. And these are the two connectors that I'll be concerned with. That's your power, your plus, your power, and your ground. So there's a hole right up under here that I'm going to have to get my wiring through. Okay, I'm going to slide the controller out. Got the controller out. Now let me see if I can fish this through the hole. Okay, so I got my wiring harness through for my battery. Looks fine. So I'm going to just go right on in here and cut these back. Just remember that the middle, the terminal that's in kind of the middle here is the red terminal. Don't want to get those mixed up. So what I want to do now is combine these, put them in parallel. Now, what I want to do is I want to put some heat shrink over this wiring. Now, put the bike rack back on it. Goes my wiring. Harness up here. And I've got a little loop in here where I can put a tie strap. One thing I want to stress out, before you put power to this unit, it is very, very, very important to make sure that your power is correct. And by doing that, this is your plus and this is your minus. And it's also over here, if you notice, you've got a minus and a plus. That's very important. So when you first hook up your wiring, you'll have this couplet out. Now what you want to make sure, first of all, when you're doing all this, make sure that you've got your key outside. So let me put the key in. Got it in the box, and as you see, I've got it in the off position. Make sure this is in the off position, and you want to get your amp meter. And what I did, I hooked my wiring from my auxiliary battery to the other side of these prongs. And on the controller, this is the power wire right here on the controller. It's red and black. Now it's very, very, very important. When you're doing this, undo this one. Now it's going to be wrapped in tape. And when you plug it back into its socket on the wiring harness, you're going to have to rewrap some tape or something. I put shrink wrap on mine, but anyway, make sure that you pull this off. Best thing to do is disconnect your controller until you make sure that this is wired properly. And the way that you do that is cut it on, this on ground, and that's power. I rode this bike today, so the power's down from the 54.6 or whatever it's normally at. And my polarity was correct. If my polarity was not correct, let me do it backwards. That minus showed up. So I know that my battery is correct. Make sure that this is correct before. That this is positive, that's negative. If not, you may be buying yourself a controller. So that being said, I've got everything back in place, and I've got two batteries. Okay, let me shut this one down. And I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna slide this battery back in. Slide it back in. Pull my key back out. Got it locked in place. Now I'm gonna go ahead and swing my bike back around and lock it in place. And I've got it locked back in place. So we're back up and locked in place with that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and try to show you what I did. And also when I ran this wire up, it's got a little nipple in there. You can put a tie strap on. I did that. And so I did a few tie straps to try to get in. I also undid this tie strap here, put a new one back in. So we would loosen up these wires so I had a little more freedom with that controller and working my wires, because it is tight in there, very tight. Okay, getting back to this box, I showed you previously how it's mounted. I'm going to go ahead and lock the box in place. Right there, turn this one there, this one there, and turn this one like so. Now we're locked in place. Oh, before I do that, I want to open this up and show you what I did on the inside. So let me back up a little bit. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my box. Now, originally, the fuse that I've got for this, originally the fuse that's on these, that's the little fuse box right there. This connector, I'll leave it in a link, got this from Amazon. This is 14 gauge wiring. I know at the beginning of this video, I was showing you some 10 gauge. Well, 10 gauge is way more than I need. I got to work on that 10 gauge wire and I realized the stuff was just too heavy. So this 14 gauge is more than adequate. I think you could probably even go to a 16 gauge. But anyway, the 14 gauge is what I'm using. And this couplet ended up at the end that goes into my controller. And that didn't work out because you just don't have enough space in there to be cramming too much stuff in it. So I decided that I would put the fuse, let me turn this thing around. I decided that I would put the fuse in here. So I've got my fuse in there. Now I would recommend doing at least a 25 amp fuse, because you know the motor tops out at 20 amps. So you want something that won't blow every time you go to 20 amps. So I'd put the 25 amp fuse in there. But that's how I've got it wired. And then again, the red wire goes to the center terminal. when I say center, it's the outside terminal, but it's at the center of the battery. And then the outside terminal is down here is your negative one. And I've also, I know you can't see it because everything is black, but I use a lot of this foam rubber insulator to wedge in between points. I think it could vibrate and end up being a short, so I don't have to worry about that. Okay, now these wires have to go back down into this slotted area. Make sure your wiring is correct. I also put a little foam pad here and here to put a little bit of pressure on it to keep it from moving around in it all. That battery's locked down pretty tight in this box, so it doesn't move. And then again, these are the little sleeves that I made that go into the screw with the little end piece which locks it in place. And I tighten these down. I use my lowest setting right here on my drill, and I let that be my gauge point where to tighten these down to. So I've got it in the lowest settings. Tighten them down. You don't want these too tight because you're going to have to turn them. So you may have to just do something like this. I'm going to get this one in place, and I may want to snug it back up a little bit like so. And I want to be able to turn it and get it locked back into place. So that one's going to go that way. And I've got these just added screws to hold this box lid down. And there we go. Now everything's in place. And you know, it's always good to check things out, you know, once you've got it in there, just to make sure that you didn't screw up, because you can put these things in, and if you don't watch what you're doing, you can mix your leads up again. So just to be on the safe side, every time you take that battery out of the box, put it back in the box, go ahead and check to make sure you've got your polarity right. Okay, I've got to turn it on. Okay, just turned it on, and I've got 50 volts. I don't have a minus, so I've got the polarity right. And if you notice, when I turn it off, the power goes off. That out. Got these ready to put on. And then this is another reason I like this, because I've got it up here to work on that, and I can adjust the height. Now I'm going to lower it some, back down low. As I said again, these lips right here, they poke, this went down a little bit. I put it in the vise and flattened it out more so it wouldn't create that much pressure on the bottom of my pad. As you can tell, I put this little rubber piece in it. It's got a little indentation in it. I don't know if you can see it. It's actually got a little indentation where it actually hits on that. But I'll put this back in place, and it's positioned in such a way that these little lockdowns in itself keeps it from moving. See, it won't move. That lockdown puts it in there, locks it in place, so it's not going to go from side to side even before I latch it. But when I do latch it, it keeps it from coming off, flying up. So that's really all that the latches are doing, is just holding it, planing it down so it won't go anywhere. Got my latches in place, power is off, and I'll take this and I'll back in. Also, I didn't point, this has got a little cap right here, so if you ever take your battery off and you just want to not run a battery, this cap will go on it, and it's just to keep it somewhat weather tight. So you've got that cap on it, and now it'll stay weather tight. But I'll probably run my battery most of the time, because since I put an auxiliary battery on the bike, I just get the feeling that it just gives me a better feeling of security. Because I will get out and start riding, and ride a little bit farther than I plan on riding. And a lot of times I'll push it a little bit more than maybe I should, and that just gives you that little added security that if your battery does give out, you've got your backup. I'm trying to get this cap locked in place down here so it won't flap around. Okay, so we're in place. The power was off, connected. So we're up and running. Now I'm gonna go ahead and cut this on, and I'm gonna power up. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and turn this on. Voltage 51 volts, and I'm going PES1 and pull a little bit. Hear the motor kick in. The motor's kicked in. Throttle. And that's running off of the rear battery. And of course, now you can use both of these batteries at one time. And I think some people are doing it. You can run them in unison. It just means that it will be draining from each one of them about half the power it normally pull on one battery. So, but I really don't see much need in doing that, and really, as far as I'm concerned, it kind of, I just don't feel good doing it. Shouldn't hurt a thing. I'm going to use one at a time. Now I'll turn on my other battery and have it in. Now I turn it on, and its voltage is a little bit lower. That's 50.7. I took both of these batteries out today and ran about 6 miles out, 6 miles back. If I turn around, I switch batteries, switch from one to the other. So they should technically, both of them be at 51. This one's at 51, and this one's at 50.7. Maybe 50.8, it's trying to bounce up. But, you know, that's close enough. And so if I want to cut off, I'll cut this battery off. And we're off. So that's how it runs. Now, another thing, I carry a rack bag. So I wanted to make sure that this rack bag fits on here properly and everything. And this is my Dexter bag, and I put it in place. What I did on this, I did a little modifications on mine. The bag never did fit right, even when I had it on the rack by itself, because these racks are oversized racks. This is made for a 6-inch, and this is 7-inch. So what I did was I added some extensions on this. Actually, you see where I sewed them in and everything. So when I put this thing on and I don't have my box in here, that's how I use it. But with my box, I need an extension. And so I've got these Velcro straps. Run these through, very simple. Pick it up on the other side, run it through, and tighten it down. And then I pull it back up under, so I get it locked down, pull it back under. And I want my Velcro to come just about to the end here so I can get a good, so now I've got that one locked in place, and I do the other one the same way. I've got little loops over here, loop, up under, and it makes it very easy to get this bag on and off too. And I've got that on. Now this bag is planted in place, it's not going anywhere, it's very tight. So that's how I usually gonna run things. And it also leaves me room right here for my recharge slider. I've got a hole here for my charger to plug in. I just pull out this plug and I plug my charger into there. So once it's on the bike in place, I don't have to take it off for recharge. I've got the plug back. So that's it. I hope that, okay, that's going to conclude this video. I hope that y'all found it interesting and maybe gives you some idea if you want to extend the bike range on your bike. So now I've doubled my mileage, and actually I have more than double it. If one of the other batteries I have is actually a 14 amp hour battery, I can put a 14 amp hour battery in, and that'll even give me more than double my range. So just gives you some idea what you can do. So until next time, y'all have a nice day.